So here we are with an impressive panel to talk about impact documentaries. So thank you, and Marta, it's your turn.
Thank you so much, Anna. Good morning, everyone. So I would like to start by the theme before introducing everybody. I think awakening empathy within the audience's heart is part of the intangible magic of documentary films. If a documentary film generates empathy, illuminating new perspectives and activating powerful emotions, what happens next? This empathy could be great fuel, great fuel for change. And a coordinated, organized, and strategic actions can facilitate a major change in society's viewpoint. And I believe that's part of what impact documentary is. And today with us is Anne Georget, documentary filmmaker. Anne, good morning. She is also the president of FIPADOC, a major international documentary film festival with a strong focus on impact films about the environment, human rights, and social change. FIPADOC is held in January in the ocean city of Biarritz, although exceptionally in 2021's edition, it will be held in June. We also have with us Chelo. Good morning, Chelo.
Good morning, Marta.
She is a journalist, a documentary filmmaker, and an impact producer. She worked in Japan developing documentaries for NHK Enterprises. She produced and directed several short documentaries, and she orchestrated her film's worldwide impact campaigns. She currently works as an impact producer for the documentary film Nasrin on jailed Iranian human rights lawyer Nasrin Sotoudeh, who has been called Iran's Mandela. Good morning. We also have Gwendolyn Olsen. Good morning, Gwen. She manages the agency MocaMedia, which specializes in the design and execution of impact, outreach, and marketing campaigns for independent films. MocaMedia launched in 2008 with the film A Sea Change about ocean acidification and climate change, which screened on all 7 continents and won multiple awards, including the NOAA Environmental Hero Award. Congratulations on that, Gwen. MocaMedia has since worked with dozens of projects as consultant and as a hands-on strategist on films ranging in subjects from social issues, the environment, to spirituality and health. And last but not least, we have Jean-François Kamiri, president of Echo Studio. Good morning, Jean-François.
Good morning.
A production studio based in Paris, specialized in producing impact movies, scripted and non-scripted, feature films, series, and TV films. During his extended career in film, he's worked in key roles for major international companies such as the Walt Disney Company, Gaumont Buena Vista International. In addition to this, he created the 2008 Disney Nature, a dedicated Disney label produced in state-of-the-art wildlife films for cinema. So if you're not the right people to talk about this, I don't know who is. So first of all, I'd love to talk very shortly and briefly about the definition of impact documentaries. Do we all agree, or would we want to expand on what I think is a well-crafted, compelling documentary with an outreach campaign seeking social and cultural impact? Would that be appropriate for you? Would you add anything else? Sure, Gwen, go ahead.
Yes, I would add that in order to be an impact campaign and impact film, there needs to be a call to action and a tangible result.
Interesting. Great add-ons. Sure, call to action. And I'm wondering, I've never produced this myself as a film producer. So you have the idea for a documentary, and you also have the desire of impact. And what do you feel comes first? Is it the campaign? Is it the documentary? Is it the film? The need to tell the story? How do you feel? Sure, Chelo, go ahead.
Yeah, I wouldn't say you first have the idea for a documentary. I would say you first feel the passion for a documentary that resonates inside of you, and you as a filmmaker need to do this film. And a correction, I also do feature-length documentaries. So anyway, so that would be my addition, it's not just the idea, it's just like resonates with you, and then you're going to do that film knowing that it has to impact the world because you feel it inside.
So how do you prepare? I'm going to jump on that. How do you prepare for a film knowing that you want to do an impact? Does it change anything on the setup? Do you start thinking about the campaign at the script level, or does it come within the research of the film?
Well, if I can talk from my experience with Sounds of Silence, Waves of Courage, my feature-length documentary, we started the impact campaign early in production because we needed funding. And apart from, applying to different grants, etc., we started doing fundraisers with work in progresses of the film. Every fundraiser, in this case, it was about sexual violence and trafficking. Every fundraiser that we did with a work in progress was in itself an impact kind of event where people will break their silence, etc. So we kind of started measuring and feeling the impact of the film back in 2008, and the film was released in 2016.
Mm-hmm. Sure. But in terms of the campaign, like you were mentioning that you were feeling the impact as the documentary improved. When do you implement the strategy campaign? This is for you as well, Gwen, I think. Like, at which point do you decide this film is worth making a campaign, or this campaign is worth making a film? Like, how does that dialogue go?
So Chelo is speaking from the filmmaker perspective, and I'm going to speak from the strategist perspective because I'm not a filmmaker, I'm the strategist. Mm-hmm. And ideally, we'd like to work with a film when they're initiating, when they have the idea. I mean, that's the ideal. What usually happens is that we step in when they're in post-production. That's the second best time to do it. The worst time is when it's already screened at a film festival or otherwise. In other words, we want to be there along the way because, or the strategy should be developing as the film is developing, because you want to lay the groundwork to have the audience that's going to take their film forward and to be involved in the campaign along the way. Mm-hmm. So ideal moments. Right away when you already have the film topic and you know exactly what you need to, what results you're looking for, or post-production. And then if you can have a strategist step in with you, because they can help you to also do strategic screenings, to gauge audience results, to see if, you need to do some final editing that might really help the film's message be stronger, so that the impact will be more tangible. Mm-hmm. And then you develop a campaign that has to, with a vision that goes anywhere between 3 months to 2 years.
That's very interesting. I was looking forward to get a little bit of a sense of what are the key components for a good outreach campaign. I mean, is there does it work the same way for each film? I guess the topic also matters into the way of making the campaign. And also you mentioned about time. I've been having a hard time wondering, like, when does it start? I guess maybe before the film. And when do you feel it should end? Sure, Jean-François, if you'd like to.
No, what I want to say that, coming back to one of the very first questions you asked, Marta, you have two types of ways of making impact with a movie. You can decide a topic first and say, okay, well, that's a topic I really want to touch on and I really want to speak about. And then you craft a movie for that, and the movie becomes a tool. And I think the word tool is very important, because that's what the movie is about when you really want to talk about a topic. So that's the very first way of doing things. And the second way is you have a director or even a producer or an author coming with an idea of a movie, and then you say, okay, well, that's a great movie in itself, a cinematographic movie, something that people, artistically speaking, people are going to relate to. The storytelling is strong, the cinematography is going to be amazing, and then it's going to be a very good way to talk about the topic. So that's, to me, the two ways of doing things. But very often, I'm facing people, directors or authors, who are not totally aware that their movies, their project, can make an impact. And we come back to them and we say, well, the movie looks great and it's going to be a wonderful film and people are going to love the artistic, everything which is around the movie. But don't forget we can make impact with that. And to come back about the question on time, I think that what's very different between a traditional movie and an impact film is that the campaign, the outreach campaign, is going to last for years. Ideally speaking, when you release a movie in theaters, you start to communicate several weeks before the movie gets out, and then 1 or 2 more weeks after, and then it's over, and you go to something else. With an impact movie, the outreach campaign can start before, but I think it's much better if it starts once people have seen the film, because that's really the starting point. Again, the movie is a tool. So you have to have people seeing it to be inspired and then to incite them to take action. But with a media chronology, depending on the countries, if the movie comes out in cinema, you need the outreach campaign to be strong when the movie comes out, then when the movie goes to VOD or DVD, then when it goes to pay TV, when it goes to free TV, when it goes to streamers. So it take up to 3 years, and during those 3 years you need to carry on during your outreach campaign, because you're going to have like maybe 20% of all the people who will have seen the movie in 10 years seeing it at the very beginning, and then another 20% 6 months later, and then another 20% 2 years later. So you need to be with those people the entire way.
To accompany them. Sure.
Yeah, to bounce back on what Jean-François was saying, I think that when you have someone in front of you who has a film project, might be a wonderful film, but I think it has to come from the person that they want this film to be used as a tool in an impact campaign, because it's going to take a toll. And as Jean-François was saying, it's going to last for years, and there isn't that much money to make out of that for that person. So I don't think, you can be very sensitive to topics about the environment, about human rights, about social justice, and all of these topics obviously are, good material to launch impact campaigns. But you have to be ready to really involve yourself in a very long process, and something that's going to probably hamper you from developing other projects for a while. And so I don't think you can be a producer or a filmmaker that works only about it as impact film, with the campaign. I mean, the full process. So, if I'm talking about the festival, I think it singles out films that are very good on the cinematographic point of view and the narrative and all of that. And that's one of the things that I think a festival can do is shed light on a number of films. And we have this special category at FIPADOC about impact films. And then you can have other roles which we are trying to develop into having, networks and using our label to help the film travel in all sorts of networks. Because I think one of the things that are at stake is like, for those films, it's interesting where they reach out of their natural audience, because you don't have to convince people who are already convinced about that your fight is fair and that it's something that it's worth going and fight against or fight for. So I think it's very interesting in those campaigns, but you're more professional than me about that, is to try to build up networks that are where you're going to reach people that are going to be surprised by the narrative of your film, and that, this empathy that you mentioned, Marta, is going to do its work. And so I think festivals are one of the places where those things can be ignited. But I think the time of the process, as you all mentioned, is very important, because you really have to think twice and be very sure that you want to carry out an impact campaign.
Sure, Chelo, just...
Yes, elaborating a little bit on Anne's statements, which I agree totally. I wanted to say that now I'm speaking as part of MocaMedia with Gwen, that we are working on the campaign of Nasrin documentary. First of all, as a filmmaker, as an independent filmmaker, you can hire a company like MocaMedia or other companies that do help you establish this impact campaign. And you can work with them as long as your budget allows, and you have to maybe ask for grants to cover that budget. But that campaign will last maybe a year, ideally 2 years. But after that, you're alone as a filmmaker with your film. And as Anne said, you need a big commitment to the issue, because the film is going to carry on like 5 years or even 10. Some of them, are evergreens. So you need to be prepared. And one thing that we do at MocaMedia is we help the filmmaker get totally ready, so that when the campaign with MocaMedia ends, because the budget has been exhausted, the filmmaker has the tools to be able to continue the campaign on their own, responding to things that have been set in motion or exploring new ones on their own.
And if I may step in, I'll add a layer also to what Jean-François said. There's, aside from the typical release journey, which is, the film festivals, a distributor, theatrical, VOD, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's the other layer that that the filmmaker can add and that we add, which is the educational screenings. At least in North America, that's very extensive and very well received, and also can be still a high revenue stream as well. Mm-hmm. And the other is community screenings, where and the third is partner organizations, so that there will be strategic partner organizations that can use the film to move forward, as you said, as a tool, Jean-François, as a tool to leverage their own mission. Mm-hmm. So they use it within their conferences, within their own events, and to bring the message forward that, it strengthens what they're trying to pursue as well. And then in terms of community screenings, this is how you reach both your core audience, as Anne was pointing out, the people who are going to do it right, or, already get the topic and are already on board with you, but then because they bring it to their community, then you reach, little by little, you can trickle out to larger groups of people who may not be so familiar or who have a different perspective, and then get another way to look at the topic. And those community screenings can involve student groups or activist groups or churches. We work a lot with the faith-based communities, particularly in the United States, but you can look for them elsewhere in the world as well, and local representatives in who are focused on policy issues might bring it as well to their communities through their cultural centers or their offices, whatever the case may be. So these are other layers to how you can structure your campaign.
Yeah, if I may quickly just add that we are, for Nasrin, for example, we're working with parliaments, European Parliament, New Zealand Parliament, parliamentarian associations, human rights lawyers associations, bar associations, international bars. So it just depends on the theme that you are addressing. And the
mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Jean-François, you wanted to add something to that?
Yeah, I wanted to say two things. First of all, there's something we need all to be careful of when we talk about impact movies. I think that the word impact is very important, but the word movie, and it coming back to what Anne was saying, is even more important. Too often, we are facing as producers people who wants to do impact with a film, who wants to touch on a very specific topic, but they kind of forget the importance of making a great movie. And a good impact movie is, before all, a good movie. You need to have a good story. You need to tell it the best way possible. Everything which is technical needs to be perfect. And too often, I see movies on very important topics, but the way the film is being done is not strong enough to really carry what people want to say. So a good impact movie is before all a good movie. That's one thing I wanted to say. And the second thing is, what's very important in terms of outreach campaign is the fact that a movie in the world we live today needs to travel. And too often, again, when we do impact movie, when French people do an impact movie, for instance, there's a tendency to concentrate the impact campaign on France. And then the movie is going to travel. It's going to be sold to a Latin American distributor, to a North American distributor, to Japan. But then what's going to happen? Are those people in North America, in Latin America, in Japan, are they going to do the outreach campaign? And the same thing works with the US. I've seen so many great impact movie coming from the US, where the outreach campaign in the US was amazing. But then when they come to Europe, the people in charge of those movies in Europe don't really know what to do in terms of outreach campaign, or they don't have strategists just like you, Gwen. And then the impact of the film is really working in the country of origin, but doesn't translate outside of this country of origin. So I think it's very important for all the strategists like you, Gwen, and I'm sure you do it, but maybe everybody doesn't do it the way you're doing it. It's really to think about a global impact campaign. And I don't have the feeling that today global impact campaign are really a reality.
Mm-hmm.
If I may respond.
Go ahead, Gwen.
A little plug for MocaMedia. We are actually an international agency. I'm based out of Europe, and my partners, and as is Chelo, and my partners are in the United States. So we do look very globally, but we'll say this: most of the films that we work with, the great majority, are not suitable to travel outside of their country of origin because they are very focused on issues within their country of origin. So we already advised from the beginning, what are your goals and where do you want this film to go? Mm-hmm. And where do you want it to have the most impact? Sometimes it really is within the country of origin.
Absolutely.
So we just leave it at that. It's circumstantial that I'm in Europe. In other words, if it's only exclusively a film that works in the United States, that's where it's going to stay. Mm-hmm. If it's a film like Nazarene, which has, covers, issues that, she's an international icon at this point, but beyond that, what she represents affects everyone across the globe. Issues of human rights, issues of women's rights. And so therefore, that's easily a film that in fact has and will continue to travel around the world. Mm. But it's rare.
Anne, Anne and Chelo, if you...
Go ahead.
No, I was actually, but it's an ongoing thinking about those films that are coming from the South. And for instance, I'm thinking of a film that we have this year in the impact selection at FIPADOC. It's called Azakivi, and it's from Madagascar. And I think it's also a thing that we have to be careful about is not to have too often a Western world way of looking at things, and the filmmakers from the countries that we describe the realities of sometimes have a very difficult time accessing, although the films are good, but accessing the festival circuits and on all of that. And for instance, this is about a place in Madagascar that's been sort of bought out by an Australian mining company, and they're going to build up this huge harbor, and meanwhile destroying all the habitat and all the ancestors' territory for these people. So it's really terrible, and I'm sure there would have been a tool there to an impact campaign in Australia and in the country. But obviously, it was such an effort right now to make the film exist in our world in the Western world where the money is, that I don't think I haven't heard anything about any campaign going with the film. So it's something that's on the back of my mind. It's like, we Western filmmakers often look at a reality, whether it's poverty, whether it's illiteracy, whether it's, and we bring back that and we try to carry out a campaign about it. But I think it's also interesting to think in terms of what about the way that the local people look at their reality, and how can we help that way of looking at things, which is definitely, I'm sure Chelo or I would have made a film about that same reality, that same Australian project. It would have been a completely different film. And so I think it's also in our role to try to make room for that, for all those films. And it's only the beginning.
Sure. Chelo, go ahead. And I'd like...
Yes.
We're running. We still have a little time, but there are a few topics I'd like to touch on, and there's a few questions as well.
Okay, very quickly. First of all, Anne, congratulations for creating the impact section in your film. That's fantastic. Movies That Matters also does that. That's what is needed. My answer would be there is very little awareness of impact producing in Europe. In Spain, I'm talking with documentary filmmakers who don't know the concept. And there is no funding available, very little funding. In the US, there is much more funding for impact. That's one thing. And then, Anne, merci beaucoup, but that's a very important point that you raised. And right now I'm developing a film about Zimbabwe activists that have been state abducted and tortured. And I'm bringing in Zimbabwe team to bring their perspective. So I'm trying for them to tell their story from that. That's a very important discussion for another panel that we need to have, because this in the US now is hot, that the filmmakers need to talk about the stories that they live in.
Absolutely. And I've actually, you kind of touched on one of the topics. I thought it's important to go into the market trends. And I completely agree, Chelo, that I think Europe, the US has much more funding right now for outreach campaigns than in Europe. Filmmakers and let's thank ChangeNOW for opening this discussion here. I think Europe has not been using that tool as much. I'm talking about the outreach campaigns. It's something that's barely starting, so it's wonderful to give it a big push with this conversation. So I was interested to know about, how do you feel that impact documentaries are received and perceived on three ends, actually. One is the audience. Do you feel that, I'm going to go along the way and you can all jump in later on. It's like, do you think that the audience, isn't there a rejection to an outreach campaign, like call to action again, yet do something? I just want to watch a film. Let me just enjoy the arts. Distribution companies, does it add value, an outreach campaign, or does it make it more complicated? As we spoke before, the outreach campaign coexists with the distribution of the film. So how do you feel distributors and taking advantage of having Anne here for festivals? Is it a plus or a minus? I, as well as the director of a film festival, sometimes feel that the movie has been crafted for a certain message and could be biased. So I'd love to hear on these three levels, how do you all feel about? Yes, Jean-François.
Well, it all comes back to what we were saying before about the fact that it needs to be a very good movie first. Mm-hmm. So that answers the question of the festival. If you want to make impact, the movie has to be good. And if the movie is good, then it has a place in FIPADOC or other festivals. As far as the moviegoers or the watchers are concerned, again, they have to see a good movie first, and then if they have been inspired by this movie, then the outreach campaign is going to help them take actions, do something, because they have been inspired first. So I don't think that the people who are watching the film, the audience, has to be bombarded with, you're going to see a movie about environment, about climate change, about education. But again, all comes back to, you're going to see a movie. And then if what has been said, what has been shown in this movie inspired you, wait, we have things for you. We have a website, we have social networks, we have an outreach campaign which is going to give you keys to carry on. But again, the movie is a tool. The good movie is an even better tool. So that's the way it works to me.
Sure. Would you agree, Anne, on the festival? You're not at all. You wouldn't be.
Completely. I think I think the strengths of all these films are the characters and the narration and all of that. And if you're touched, there's this little window that opens, and then some new messages can come in. But first of all, it's a human exchange between the character or between the reality that's shown on the screen and all of that. If you're carried out, if you're touched, and then you are all open to things that even you didn't think you were capable of, or suddenly being and then you have all sorts of proposals with the impact campaign, and you say, well, yeah, I feel comfortable with doing this. This is too much for me, or this is too much for that. And I think we need all sorts of level of involvement. Mm-hmm. But I completely agree with Jean-François is that the key and the entry point is a movie that's gonna carry you out.
Lovely. And Chelo, yes, as a filmmaker, how do you feel distributors perceive a film with an impact campaign attached to it?
Well, allow me to respond to what Anne was saying, which I agree. Because, and just a clarification, there is two types of impact films, in my opinion. One is the call to action film, like Gwen was referring to, that you have a signature campaign, that you're gonna do something politically, etc., action, like in doing something right now. The other film is the one that touches you so much, as Anne was saying, that then you implement that in your life. Like Sounds of Silence touches you inside, and then you want to start exploring abuse in your own life and around you, etc. But other films have made me stop eating fish, for example, or become a vegetarian, etc., because I felt it in my guts. So there's two types of calls to actions. The one the good film that makes you feel it, that you reverberate with it, and the one that puts, maybe very strong, and puts the signature at the end as a call to action. So distributors with impact campaign, I think they are now looking for that. And actually, I have distributors now that are contacting me because they want to refer their clients to impact producers. So that's been an interesting evolution.
Yes, actually, one of the questions from our audience was, is there any distribution companies that focus on impact campaigns? I mean, are there any names? I think there are some filmmakers in the audience that would like to.
Well, I could refer to Java Films. I know they are very interested in films that create an impact like that. And Dogwood Films too, I could say.
Jean-François, you had a...
Yeah, well, we at Eco Studio are producers and distributors.
Oh, okay.
So
great.
So that's what we do, and we are specialized on impact movies.
Mm-hmm. Lovely. Well, there you go. And actually, the next question was, as I was heading there, and the audience as well would like to know about funding. Of course, that's always a big question, because we are talking about an impact campaign that would increase a normal production film budget. And so I guess that the question is, does it already exist any specific funding channels for this? Any tips and tricks to get funding, I'm sure will be welcomed, and maybe some insight on, does it make it harder or easier yet again?
Are you talking about funding the impact campaign or funding the film itself?
Actually, I guess that, I mean, my question was in I see it as a bulk. I see, as we're talking from impact documentaries, I see them together. I see that if you want to make an impact documentary, you have a bigger budget because you need an outreach campaign. So to me, it's 2 in 1 if you're hoping to do that. So, but if you'd like to, if it's easier to separate them, I mean, I guess that the end question is, how does a filmmaker make it happen? I mean, a film, I think, as a topic has been reviewed in other places. Here we're talking about impact films. So I'd like to see it as a whole, or maybe the outreach.
Well, I think that there's a difference between countries, because I mean, for instance, in the US, and I think when you are talking about that, it's probably easier and even in terms of bureaucracy and administratively speaking, but also in the gene itself, it's much easier to get money from foundation in the US than outside of the US, or at least in some European countries. US is really one step or several steps ahead from Europe on those type of things. And because impact production and impact movies are much more elaborate in North America than it could be elsewhere, it's much easier to get the funding necessary for a very strong outreach campaign in the US than elsewhere, because I think that actually the money needs to come from those foundations, needs to come from those big companies or people who really believe that the topic is important and that they need to support it, and support it through a movie is a good way.
Sure. Anne had some.
Yeah, I'll try to be quick. I think it goes to some cultural and structural reality. Is that, for instance, in France, the fiscal structure that makes it extremely complicated for the production company to go out and get funding from foundation, or even worse, directly from a firm. Or so I think, and so that's the law and all of that. That's the structure. But then I think even culturally, because of that, you can hardly find people who are ready in their head to believe that, oh yeah, my company could be part of that, and that would be a nice project and all of that. So I think there's a whole cultural revolution to need to be happening. We are trying to do our share at FIPADOC. We have a lab. It's just the beginning. We had just had 1 year, but it's both trying to educate impact producers, which is very new in France, and at the same time, I think we also have some work to do, and we'll try to develop that into towards the economical world, and try to let them know that those tools exist, and that putting the name of their company on those things can be some really interesting thing, and not be greenwashing, and not be some those horrible things, but to be something very faithful. So I think that there's a whole, compared to the US, obviously the structure is completely different, and it's years and years and years of different approach to that. So, you have all this charity culture in the Anglo-Saxon world that we don't have here, at least in France. And I think it's a whole cultural revolution that we need to make.
Couldn't agree more with what Anne just said. And I think that if one day we could do like a syndication, or I don't necessarily like this, but association of impact producers around the world, maybe there would be enough people around the table to lobby and help those movies to get to another level, and help the situation.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, if I may, I'll step in and I'll respond first to the last comment. Jean-François, there is already a global impact producers group. We're about 400 people strong, and it's a very, very active, interactive, and helpful group. And if I invite you to join it. I'll send you the link if you'd like.
I was going to say, Gwen, please share the name. You can let us all know so we can.
Global Impact Producers Group.
Global Impact Producers Group.
It's a listserv.
Just wanted to make people know.
Yeah. It's a listserv, and it's very active. And there are people who are very experienced, and people who are just starting out, and filmmakers who just want to understand a little bit more about what it means to do an impact production. So that's already active. As I said, 400 people strong already. And then also responding to funding. Yes, the United States is very strong on that, the United States and Canada. There are many private foundations, whether they be family foundations or foundations that are just representative for filmmakers, that there are foundations that specifically have grants for impact campaigns for films. They are very competitive, and there are more and more filmmakers who are applying for these grants. That said, there are still many other options. I mean, crowdfunding is still a thing. Friends, family, and fools will participate at the beginning, at the ground level. And then this is the other reason why we say start your campaign the sooner the better, because you develop an audience that if they really want you, they grow with you with your film as you develop your film, and that may participate financially at some point because they want to see the product come through. They want to see the project have an effect, develop and have the impact. They have messages that they want to put out there as well. So if you have an audience that's growing with you, the likelihood that they might, chip in, whether it be €5 or 10,000 at some point, is higher. If you want to run a crowdfunding campaign, or if you have a donation system set up, there are other ways to go about it. I also believe, and excuse me, I don't know the names of it, but I know that there are grant funding organizations in Switzerland, the Netherlands, and elsewhere that do provide funding for impact campaigns. And I'm sorry, I don't know the names of them right now, but
that's okay.
We are focused on that as well.
Absolutely. Well, we're running out of time, I'm being told, and but that was a lovely way to close off on opportunities. I did want to gather how some of the information. I think that what sums up a good impact documentary would be a great film, as Jean-François very strongly advocated, and I think we all agree, a very strong film, and have a campaign, an outreach campaign that makes it travel through all layers of society, from government to small community screenings, and think about the outreach in all territories. I thought that was very, very insightful, absolutely. And of course, the strongest or the biggest issue I think we touched upon was the coexistence between the success of the film and the outreach campaign, and the timing that this has for the filmmaker. I felt that there's an opportunity for a lab, Anne, for an impact lab. I think that we should talk about this between France and Spain. And then again, the few names we've dropped about the Java and Dog Wolf and Echo Studios, of course, as distribution companies, the Global Impact Producers, an interesting hub to be part of if you're interested, and all of this to make great documentaries and hopefully change the world for the better, at least a little bit. Thank you so much to all of you. And I hope everybody has a wonderful day at ChangeNOW today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Very much, Marta. Thank you for.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure to be with all of you.